Okay. Turn to Romans chapter 13. We finished up Romans 12. Now we're in Romans 13. Romans 13, it can be a hard... We're going to look at verse 1 through 7. It can be a hard thing to enact when Paul is talking to the church at Rome. And so I want to make sure that you understand where he's going with this, what he's saying about this, what he's doing. But I need you to understand how it goes and how it affects us as well. Okay? A couple questions just to get us thinking in the way that Paul is leading here. Now, in our, and I think maybe you understand what I'm talking about, is our world or our country, our home in heaven or here? Which one? As Christians, our home is where? Right, heaven, okay. In fact, John 17:16 says, they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Okay? But here's the question. Are we supposed to get involved in this world or in politics as individuals? What do you say? Yes or no? Ooh. See, I told you this was going to be difficult. Okay, if God asks you, okay. I just read John 17:16. It says, they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. But verse 15, which I didn't read, right before that, says, I pray not that thou shouldest take them out of the world, but that thou shouldest keep them from the evil. See, I understand, and I want to make sure you understand. We have a kingdom not of this world, right? Okay. But we still live in this world, don't we? Okay. So how do we live in this world that is not our world? How should we live in this world that is not our world? Yes. Okay, to be the example.
If we don't do anything to advance the kingdom of God, then everything's going to get worse.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. How else? How should we live in this world even though this is not our world?
Yeah, we're in the world, but we still should be representing Christ.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, let's read the text, and then I'm gonna get your mind going to where Paul is leading. Okay, so Romans chapter 13. Does someone want to read verse 1 through 7 for me? Just to save my voice a little bit from talking all day today. Romans 13, 1 through 7. Would someone want to read that for me out of the King James? No one wants to read today? Okay. Brother Colton, could you do that? I appreciate that.
I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye
Nope. Romans 13. That's 12. But you were close. I like that verse.
let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to them condemnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, the revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Wherefore ye must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. For this cause pay ye tribute also, for they are God's ministers, depending continually upon this very thing. Render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor.
Now, I want you to remember who Paul is writing to. Remember, we've studied this the last 12 chapters. Who is Paul writing to? Jews and Christians, both, at the churches in Rome. Okay? It's not just one church, it's several churches he's writing to in Rome. In fact, his letter, the book of Romans that we have, is spread throughout, not just in Rome, but all over the world. But he is writing to those churches that are in Rome. Now, what's peculiar about those churches in Rome? What kind of hardship are they going through in Rome at the churches? Do you remember? How many remember? Yeah. It was, but it was not so much persecution as was. He said, I want to exile all Christians from Rome. Not that I want to kill them yet, but I want to exile them because they're starting fights and they're which they really weren't. But it was illegal. He made it illegal because it was illegal to be a Christian in Rome because he didn't want Christians in Rome. Okay? And here's the thing. The first thing Paul writes to them is, let every soul be subject unto higher powers. Now, if you're in Rome and you're being persecuted or you're being told you have to leave Rome, and then Paul writes, hey, you need to be subject to the higher powers. The first question is, Paul, what are you talking about? Because do you not know what he's doing to us? Do you not know what the higher powers are doing? What the authority... But here's what Paul's talking about. And this kind of sets it up for this passage here. The best citizens should be Christian citizens. Even though the church, we are not to be involved in politics as a whole, individually, we are called to be involved in influencing politics. There is nothing wrong with one of you running for governor. If you want to, I'll vote for you. Okay? But the church, we will not get involved in politics. I will never stand up there and tell you, you need to vote for this person. That is not the church's job. Okay? I will tell you, you should vote according to the Bible, and you should vote according to what God wants, but I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, because that's not the church's job. But as a citizen, if and I wouldn't do this as a pastor, but if I wanted to run for a government office, I could. In fact, you think about all the people in the Bible who were in government offices. How about you give me some people who were in government offices that were in the Bible? Christians that were, well, maybe not Christians, but Jehovah followers who were in politics in the Bible. Anyone? Daniel, exactly. That's the one I have right there. Yep. Who else? Joseph is the other one I have. Those are the two I have. We'll stop right there. Okay? Think about it, though. Let's talk about Joseph first. What was Joseph involved in politics? In the government? How was he involved in the government? He was a second in charge. He had the same power as the Pharaoh. He's the one that told everyone, all the for lack of a better, the police officers and everyone else what to do. He said, now listen, you give corn to this person, but you don't give corn to that person. We have it set up like that. We're going to put laws in here. And we see that, right? With Joseph, we see Joseph. I mean, was he one of God's chosen men, Joseph? Yeah. Did he serve Jehovah? Sure did. And he showed respect for the government office, and he also served. Let's look at Daniel. Okay, how was Daniel involved? Come on, this is an easy one. He served Nebuchadnezzar. He served the king. In fact, Daniel was high up there too. Daniel was one that they looked to for many laws and many things. He served in the Babylonian government. He earned respect. And in fact, here's the cool thing about Daniel. I love Daniel. I love the book of Daniel. But as Paul is writing this, Paul has all this knowledge too, because Paul knows all these people. He was a Pharisee. He knew everything about all the Jewish people that came before him. And you're thinking, he's like, I'm sure he has this in mind too, Daniel. Daniel was a government official that changed the heart of the king of Nebuchadnezzar, old Nebi. Okay? He earned respect from Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel, in fact, Daniel did what the king wanted, as long as it was not in conflict with what God said. Remember, at the first, Daniel would not eat the king's meat because it was against what God said. And so he didn't do that. But as long as it was not in conflict with God's commands, well, the other thing, when Daniel was older, right? How was he in conflict with the government when Daniel was older? Praying. They said, listen, there's a decree. And some of the government officials tricked the king and said, you need to make a decree. No one prays to anyone except for you, king. Now Daniel's like, listen, I want to be a good citizen, but God is my authority before the king is my authority. And so he continued to pray. Remember what happened to him? He was thrown in the lion's den, and he didn't get chewed on, okay? He used one of them as a pillow, I always think. I'm going to ask him when I get up there. I'm like, Daniel, that night, did you just fall asleep on one of the lions? Like, what happened? Because it said God shut their mouth. So I'm wondering what happened. Anyway, okay, that's my own little thing. When I get to heaven, a lot of questions will be answered, okay? I know that. And in fact, here's the cool thing. Think about it, if you would. Because of Daniel, I truly believe this, in studying this out, that, you know, the wise men that came to see Jesus when he was born, you remember them? Does anyone know where they came from? Do you know? What? Persia or Babylon, those areas right there. Here's the question. Were they Jehovah followers? No. So here's the question I have for you. How in that area did they know about the Messiah being born in Bethlehem? Well, he told them when they were there, but they were following before. It says the angel even spoke to them. They saw the star, but how do they know about the star? I mean, if I see a star, I'm not going to say, hey. Where did they get that? You are absolutely, everyone that's saying it, there's only one place it came from. Who was in Babylon and Persia in that area that was a Jewish, a Jehovah follower that wrote prophecy? Daniel. There was no other person in that area that wrote prophecy. I truly believe that those wise men that came to see Jesus, they reference Daniel. In fact, they reference, I believe, because it talks about Daniel chapter 9, verse 25, where it says, know therefore and understand that from the beginning forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, the wall, and even the troublous times. And then it goes into, it'll be in someplace around Bethlehem. Here's the thing. Daniel made such an impact when he was there that it carried over. In fact, between that time, it was about 600 years. So you think about it. Daniel served in government, but he was such a good citizen and such a good Christian. Well, I say Christian. He wasn't a Christian. He was a Jehovah follower. But such a good one that he even influenced those who didn't follow God. Now, I think about us today, and we're going to look at this, what Paul says. But shouldn't we be influencing our lawmakers today by being such a good Christian? Yeah. And they all, by being in politics or by being serving, they influence the government for God. Now, when I look at Paul was an influencer. Okay? I mean, he started churches all over. I look at Paul, I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know why this hit me, but Paul must have been a really good preacher. Right? Because so many people listened to him and wanted to follow him, and he started so many churches. I mean, he must have been a really good preacher. But Paul is now telling the Jews and the Christians who are Jews and the Christians who are Gentiles, he's saying, listen, you need to obey your government. What? What are you talking about, Paul? Or if you're old enough, what you talking about, Willis? I know some of you aren't that old. It's my birthday. I can throw out old things, okay? Yeah, no, I'm not 60. Stop it. Man. But even, and I look at Daniel as well, and as we're coming into this, I look at Daniel, and Daniel 6:4 says something that really struck me that I think Paul had in mind too. It says, because they tried to trip up Daniel, right? But they never could. And it says, then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom. They tried to say, hey, listen, he's not following this in the kingdom. He's not doing this in the kingdom. And it says, but they could find no occasion or fault. He was not going against the kingdom and against Nebuchadnezzar. For as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. That's why they devised the plan that if we'll trick the king, and hey, if someone's praying against the king or praying to someone besides the king. And as a result of that faithful work, Daniel's legacy went on. And then we get Paul, okay? And Paul says in Romans chapter 13:1, got it? Says, they're at the capital city of Rome. And he says this, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. That's quite a different way to start off the chapter when you're writing to those who are directly under the power of the emperor. Okay? Could you imagine? He's like, hey, Bartholomew. I don't know if that was. Hey, Bartholomew, you need to obey the Roman government because God put them there in power. And I could see old Barth, that's why I like that name, saying, but Paul, don't you know they're exiling Christians? Or don't you know that some Christians are even in jail and you're telling us to follow the government? In fact, we're disobeying him by even having a church in Rome. What are we supposed to do about that, Paul? And I can see Paul saying, hey, listen, Barth. God has put you here, so that supersedes the government. But outright disobedience to things that God hasn't superseded is wrong against the government. Look at verse 2 through 7. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power. What power is he talking about here? Government. Verse 1. Resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance, or the diatigity, which means institution, the instrumentality, the will, the placement of God. And they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation, krima, a function or effect going against a crime, a condemnation. Verse 3. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is a minister of God to thee for good. Who's he talking about, he? Who's he saying that he is a minister of God for thee for good? Yeah, the ruler, the politician, whoever it is, okay? He is a minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, ye need to be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Wherefore ye must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. Even though the rulers of the government, hey, listen, many rulers in the government are not Christians. Did you all know that? Oh, you're surprised, right? Okay. There's many rulers in the government that aren't Christians. Many of them are far from Christians. And you can tell that. But here's what God says, and here's what he's saying in here, and here's what Paul's telling them. They're still an instrument of God. This is a hard thing to come by, and this is a hard thing to understand. You know, there have been presidents who I have downright not liked. I wish they would not have been president. There are leaders who I wish, and there's still leaders who I wish were not leaders. But one thing I have to understand is this. God has put them in place. And who am I to criticize what God does? That is a hard thing. My Christian belief and what I know is right, and someone who is in power doing what is wrong, it is hard for me to make those things mesh. But this is what God is saying. The best citizen is a Christian citizen. One that follows the rules. One that lives for God. At the same time, is a good follower of those who are in charge. Man, there are some people I do not want to follow. And I'm not going to talk about certain ones. I'm just telling you, there have been people in the past and people now that I do not want to follow. There are people in Congress I do not want to follow. There are people in the House I do not want to follow. Okay? Because I look at them and I say, you guys are just evil. Okay? But we have to understand one thing. God's plans are not our plans. I wish I knew everything God was going to do. Sometimes I ask God, what are you doing with this dude or this girl? Why don't you just take them out? I'm not saying take them out like that, okay? I'll call it, oh great, now we're going to get, FBI's going to come in and say, I heard you called for assassination. No! Take them out of office. There are some higher ups that I see on the TV all the time who just turn my stomach every time I see them. This is a hard passage. But this is what it means. We got to trust God. God trusts God more than we trust what we can see. And I know it's hard. I know it's difficult. And even though they may not be Christians in the government, they're still an instrument of God. I know I've used this illustration before, but you know the Bible that we use a lot, we use here is a King James Version, okay? Even with the King James Version, God used a wicked king to get the King James Version translated into English. Now, could you imagine if you were back then and you were saying, who is that guy to have the Bible translated? He's as evil as anyone. He didn't even claim to be a Christian. King James never claimed to be a Christian, like believe in Jehovah and everything. But he was, and here's the thing, in his mind, he was doing it because he didn't like the Catholics. He didn't like the Romans. He didn't like the French. And he wanted to have his own Bible. And God said, I can use that. And the King James 1611, King James had 60 men all around the world translate so he could have his own English version of Bible. And guess what? We got it today. God can use the evil man to bring about good in the Christian's life. And as I look at what Paul's saying, and I know, you just think about how hard it would be for those who were in Rome, under the Roman thumb. And he says, listen, wherefore we must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. For this cause pay ye tribute also, for they are God's ministers. How is that guy God's minister? He is evil. Because God put him in there for a reason. And I'm going to ask you a question. If I'm supposed to respect the rule of government, how am I supposed to respect those who are not saved in government? How do we respect those in government who are not saved? How do we do it? I'm asking you. Pray for them. And that's exactly right. You understand that when Paul was writing this, and even throughout history, Christians and those who were from Israel, they refused to worship kings. Daniel was one of them. He refused to worship the king. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you remember the big statue? They refused to fall down and worship the image of the king. Joseph did not worship Pharaoh. They all didn't worship him, but here's what they did to show their respect for the government and for the office. They prayed for them. We are called to do the same. We are called to pray for our leaders, the good ones and the bad ones. And I'm not saying praying, Lord, take them out. Okay? We're supposed to pray for them, that they would see God, that God would be able to use them as an instrument for his will. And even if we can't respect the man in office or the woman in office, as Christians, we're still supposed to respect the office. Here's the hard thing that we have many times, and every political term, every time we have a presidential election, I try to emphasize this because this is what Paul's trying to emphasize. Listen, you may not like the person who is the president. You may not like the person who was the president or will be the president. There are many presidents I thought were evil. But we still are called as Christians to respect the office of president. May not like the man, may not like him at all, but you're called to respect the office. That means whoever's in there, you show respect. Now here's where the rubber meets the road and which is not too popular. You don't complain about them. Ouch. Whew, that's hard on me. Because, man, I got some things I would love to complain about, even about the president we have now. But I respect the office. And it's been hard to reconcile that. And sometimes I just got to sit back and say, Lord, you're in control. And I respect the office of president. I respect the office of governor. I respect the office of representative. I respect the office of congressman or congresswoman. I respect the office. So I'm going to respect whoever's in there to the point where if they say something or they do something that's against you, I will not follow that. But if it's not against you, Lord, since I respect the office, I will follow. God set up three types, only three institutions on earth. Do you know what the three institutions God set up on earth? Three of them in the Bible. He talks about the institutions. One is what? The home, right? Let me give you the first one, the home. Genesis 2, God set up the home. Do you know the second one? The church. That's in Acts 2. God set up the church. That's another institution he set up. And the last one? The government. That's in Genesis 9. He set up the government. God established a government even before the government was named the government. Do you know Abraham was told, the people were told, he was told to treat his laborers with respect and compassion. But you know the laborers were told and commanded to respect and follow the leadership of Abraham? Even to the point of circumcision. Our government is actually set up and based on the government of Israel. Do you know that? Do you know the government of Israel is based on the government of Israel? What are the three forms or three government things here? Do you know the three governments here? The elected, come on. The executive, the legislative, and the judicial. When God set up Israel, now at first it was ran by God. You had God who was running everything. And then they complained and they said, what do they want? We want a king. So God said, okay, you want a king? I will give you what you want. You'll regret it. I'll give you what you want, but we're also going to have a few other things. And he set up, first of all, the judges and the prophets. The Bible, which, just like the judicial, interprets laws. He set up then the king. Who was the first king? Saul. Now, at first he was a good king, but he turned out to be a pretty bad king. Okay? And that's our executive branch. Okay? The president, who is supposed to, now listen, the president is to enforce the laws. Did you know that? That's what his job is supposed to be, to enforce the laws. And then the legislative, which was God who gave the laws, who makes the laws. That's what our government was set up on. By it, God set it up to protect the people from sin and outside destruction. Listen, Israel never went off well, they eventually did, but Israel never had to worry about the other laws that other nations had. They had their own laws from God, okay? They didn't have to worry about other people's opinions either. The laws were from the Bible. I wish we learned that today. I wish we learned that opinions are just that. Do you know what opinions are? Opinions are opinions. They're not Bible. Do you know the only truth we have is the Bible? You have opinion, and it may be a really good opinion. I have lots of opinions. I'm not going to share all my opinions with you because some of them are harsh. But we all have opinions. But your opinion and my opinion is not truth. Your opinion and my opinion is not Bible. Your opinion and my opinion is not godly. The only thing that is truth that never changes is the Bible. So, opinions are nice. And you know what? Some opinions aren't wrong. But we got to take them like that. And this is what God is saying. He's like, listen, we got to follow the laws of the Bible. And one of the things that Paul says is this. One of the laws of the Bible is God has set up government as a defender of us, and we are to follow government. Listen, yeah, if government oversteps, the Bible says you do not follow when government goes against God. If it ever comes to a time where if it oversteps and makes ungodly laws or acts in a way that is wrong, like same-sex marriage, yeah, or abortion. Abortion's wrong. Okay? But that's the only time when it goes against God that we are okay to break the rules of the government. According to this. Now, I would be right in going to jail if I were refused to marry 2 guys or 2 girls. I would be right. I would not be going against God's law. I may be going against the government law, but I wouldn't be going against God's law. You know, in fact, that kind of happened in California. I would be right in that. And Daniel had to go against the government too. But that's not what Paul is talking about here. Paul is saying, listen, if it doesn't go against God, then as a good citizen, you're supposed to, as a godly citizen, you're supposed to follow the laws of the land. And like I said, sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it's hard. I don't like to pay taxes. How many of you love to pay taxes? I hate taxes. I really hate property taxes. We just had to pay our taxes. it's not a pleasant experience. I remember the days when I was younger and we used to get tax returns. Those were so nice. I have not had a tax return for like 26 years. I don't like paying taxes. I really don't like paying property tax that I know that when I pay off my house, I still got to pay a tax for it. I don't like that, okay? I really, really don't like it, okay? But here's the thing. I'm still supposed to pay taxes according to the Word of God. In fact, it says this as we look down here at verse 5, 6, and 7. Wherefore we must needs be subject not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. For this cause pay ye tribute also, for they are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing. Render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom is due, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. It's tough. Amen? Am I the only one? Y'all like paying taxes? Okay. But we're not going to start a militia and not pay our taxes. Okay? That would be wrong. And verse 3 even says, for rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. Government is set up by God to protect those who are right and punish those who are wrong. That's how it's set up. I know it's not always like that, but that's how it's set up. Those who murder, those who rape, those who steal, those who slander, they are all evil. Amen? And the government is set up to punish those people. Let me ask you. So if, let's say, Indiana were not a death penalty state, is capital punishment still ordained by God? Is capital punishment ordained by God? Yes. Yeah, it is. Genesis 9:6 says, Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. And verse 4 even talks about it. Verse 4 says this, for he is a minister of God to thee for good, but if thou do that which is evil, you need to be afraid, for he beareth not the sword. Now, if you study that out, look at it. He beareth not the sword in vain. You know, that's a form of that's talking about is capital punishment. For he is a minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Government was ordained by God for capital punishment. Now, I've had debates. I used to do this all the time when I was in teens. I don't know if, I'm sure Jordan remembers. I know Dina does. We used to have a debate in teen group. And I would pick half the room that they would be against capital punishment, and half the room would be for capital punishment. And then they were supposed to come back the next week, and they were to debate it. And even if you didn't agree with it, you're supposed to debate it. Now, if you didn't agree with it, it was really hard to debate it, okay? But you were supposed to research it, look up the Bible, look up other things. And one of the things that we always, as we were debating and everything, one of the things came back to is this: God ordained the shedding of blood for shedding of innocent blood. Still does. Now, I don't know how you feel about capital punishment, but I know it's from the Bible. I'm probably preaching to the choir, though. But Paul says, listen, even for capital punishment, that's why the government's there. The government is there to protect us. And I can understand, I can see them in Rome. I can put myself in, as I always tell you, put yourself in where you're reading. If I put myself in Rome, I'm thinking, Paul, you are crazy. The Roman government is no good. But Paul would say, but they are put there by God to punish evil. And even though they don't always do good, God put the office there to do good. So respect the office. 1 Peter 2:17, honor all men, love the brethren, fear God, honor the king. And so I think about all that Paul's saying here in verse 1 through 7. And listen, I don't like it, but I have to agree with it because it's Bible. The way that they showed respect to them who were in authority, 1 Timothy 2:1 through 2. I exhort, therefore, that first of all, supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings, and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all goodness and honesty. So tonight, I thought about, Lord, what are you wanting us to learn from this passage? Because this is a tough passage. What do you want us to learn from this? And I came up with this as I believe God was leading to me. I truly would believe tonight we need, for as many of you want to, we need to come to this altar and pray for our government. We need to take just a second, a little bit of time of prayer right now at the altar, whoever wants to, and we need to pray for our government. I think that's how we need to how to close this out tonight. To pray for our government that God would use them for his glory and his honor. Even though we can't see it, I truly believe we need to pray for it. So if you want to pray with me, I would love for you to join me at the altar just to pray for our government tonight. And afterward, I'll close this in prayer and we'll be dismissed.